Beating Procrastination. Welcome back to the Resilient Kid podcast. In this series on motivation, how we motivate our kids, our teens, and ourselves. So in today's episode, we're digging into something that we all struggle with, that procrastination. It's the endless dance between wanting to get something done and somehow not quite getting around to it. So whether you've got a child that's avoiding homework, a teenager delaying the revision, or it's you putting off that email you've got to send, procrastination is universal. But here's the key. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's resistance. And underneath that resistance, there's almost always an emotion. Today, we'll have a look at why we procrastinate, what happens in the brain when we do, and how finding your why can really cut through resistance. So, let's take it on. Why do we resist tasks? Well, I know for me, there's been lots of things that I've got to do. So when I was writing the book, I used to sit there and there'd be a good 20 minutes before I actually put any words on the page. And for me, it became part of the process that I knew I would fanny around for 20 minutes and then I'd get down to it. But that was part of it. Now, I then started to think, why am I not just getting to it? So I started to have a deep dive into the science behind it. When faced with a task that might feel big or boring, uncertain, then the brain's amygdala, the fight and flight part, the part that detects that threat, lights up. It sees the task as dangerous. It sees it as uncomfortable. And the brain's natural response is avoid it. So that's why we often clean the kitchen before starting an assignment, suddenly remember to reorganize our wardrobe before, having to have a difficult conversation. Our brains are simply seeking relief from that discomfort. That's all it is. But there are 3 common emotional roots to procrastination. The first one being fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, or fear of what the outcome might mean. For kids, we often hear, I can't do it, it's too hard, particularly around the homework. For adults, it's often disguised as perfectionism. I'll start when I have more time, or I need to get everything perfect before I begin. Now, I often have clients that will come to me who are in their business journey, and sometimes they come to me instead of going to a business coach because we'll have a look at the blocks in moving their business forward. And actually, yesterday, I had a client who was one of these clients, absolutely lovely, doing really, really well in the business, but was just struggling to upscale a little bit. And when we had a look at that, it was around, but I've got to do this other course and I've got to do, I'm not qualified enough. And actually, when we really dug down, it wasn't that at all. She had all the qualifications, all the experience she needed. It was a fear around it, that fear of failure. And sometimes that can be fear of success as well. So the second one, the second emotion would be overwhelm. The task just feels too big. It's unclear. So what we do there is we freeze. Think of that student who looks at the whole revision book, the ones that schools are sending home at the moment for the year 11s, and they just don't know where to start. Think of a parent who, and this might be you, who's been meaning to sort out a pile of paperwork for months, but just can't face it. Yeah, we've all got one of them, haven't we? And then there's also lack of clarity or connection. Now, this is when we don't understand why something matters to us, because then that's when motivation just evaporates. A child told to tidy their room because you have to is going to resist. But if they understand that it will help them find their toys faster or help clear their, headspace so they can revise better, then it makes sense. So procrastination isn't about laziness. It's the brain choosing short-term relief, avoidance, over long-term satisfaction, completion of the task. The trick is to make the task feel safer, smaller, and more meaningful. Now, how do we do that? So let's give you some tools on breaking through procrastination. So the first one is chunking. By breaking down big tasks into smaller specific steps, then that really helps. So let's try, instead of revise for exams, revise science for 10 minutes. Your brain perceives that's achievable. It's not overwhelming, it's not too big. That's an easy, small step that's achievable. Let me give you an example. When I work with students, we often write down micro steps for revision, particularly if they're in that state of paralysis, I just can't, I don't know what I'm doing. And we will do it in tiny, tiny steps like this. 1, open the book. 2, read 1 paragraph. 3, write 1 key point from that paragraph. Now, that might seem like surely they would just open the book, but actually there's a few reasons why. 1, where each step is given a tiny dopamine hit. 2, you can see the progress. You're ticking off, literally ticking off as you do it. And actually it just gets them, and each step fuels the next step because it's easy and it's achievable. Second tool, just 5 minutes rule. So commit to working on something just for 5 minutes. Once you've started, that momentum builds and you often keep going. Research will say that if you do something for 5 minutes, you're 80% more likely to carry on. It tricks the brain past that hump, past the harder part, getting started. You might say to yourself, right, I'm only going to tidy my desk for 5 minutes, but before you know it, half an hour's gone and it's on its way to being tidy. It works beautifully for me with kids and teens. Instead of do your homework now, let's just look at 1 question together. And that actually fear of starting, the worry around it just goes. Third one, and this is one that I use a lot, the Pomodoro technique, really, really good for students. It's the reason I like it is because it brings focus and it brings structure. So grab your phone, download a free app called Pomodoro Timer. And it is a timer that is set for 25 minutes. Now you can alter that. So if you've got younger kids, I would absolutely say use it, but make it shorter. So depending on their age, if they're in primary, you can do anything from 15, 20 minutes a time. The average we know is 25. That's why it's automatically set at that. Now, what happens is it's 25 minutes of focused work, so fantastic for high school or older students, followed by a 5-minute break. And after 4 rounds, it gives you a longer break. So it's short enough to keep the brain engaged and long enough to see progress. It's brilliant for teens revising or, adults, if you're working from home and you get easily distracted, pop it on. I'll tell you what else I've recommended it for as well. If your child plays an instrument, 25 minutes practice. Perfect. And sometimes we go, oh, you need to do this, Actually, 25 minutes is perfectly fine. And if they're doing that on a regular basis, brilliant. Science supports this as well because focus bursts reduce cognitive fatigue and helps that dopamine flow steady instead of short, sharp bursts. The kind of last one that I wanted to recommend as well is body doubling. Now, this is especially good for neurodivergent people, like those with ADHD, but in honesty, it works for everyone. Body doubling means working alongside somebody, either in person or virtually, and it keeps us accountable. You don't need to talk. Presence that helps. The brain senses a social connection and accountability, which activates this front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps with focusing and planning. a team revises better sitting next to somebody else doing, homework, or next to you doing your emails. Have you ever done that? I often will do that. I'll say, come sit at the kitchen table rather than in your room. Let's do stuff together. And what will happen is they will do that. I'll crack on with emails. There might be a little interaction, but not much. I know at the moment my youngest is doing his mocks, and what he's doing is actually pulling up his friend on FaceTime, and they're doing maths papers together. Now, while they're actually doing the paper, they're not talking at all. But at the end, they are. But they're both working at the same time. And it just really, really helps. When I was writing the first book, I had a brilliant editor called Erin. She was just amazing. And she would set out 3, right now, it was called sessions a week. And I used to jump on at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, and she would say, right, what do you want to get out of this? And there'd be a group, I think it was all women, but I'm not sure, a group of women on the call, and we would say, I want to write a chapter. Or, some of them were just writing journals or writing social media posts. It didn't matter what you were writing, just that we were writing together. And then we would all put ourselves on mute. And at the end of the session, we'd go, did we achieve it? Now, we would dip in for half an hour, 2 hours. It was entirely up to you how long you stayed. But I tell you, she's the reason the second book's not finished, because she stopped the sessions because she just got too busy. And I miss that, where we're all in the same boat. There is something magic that it does to your brain that just helps you focus more, for sure. So each of these tools, help calm that fight and flight, that amygdala part of our brain, by shrinking that threat, the perceived threat, and giving the brain achievable goals. So it's turning that avoidance into action. Now, your why, finding your why. Even with the best tools, motivation fades if you don't know why you're doing something. This is where purpose steps in. Now, purpose is one of the components of resilience, so really important. And your personal reason for doing hard thing, that hard thing that you can't tackle, we need to know why. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, said, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Now, the reason I chose this particular quote this week is because last week, the Jewish community in Manchester, there was a horrific incident. And I'm a Manchester girl, so if you've listened to the podcast or, if you've followed me, you'll know. My auntie was Jewish, and I would, on a Friday night, I lived with her for a year when I first started university, and we would do the whole thing. And it gave me an insight into the Jewish community, the Jewish culture, Jewish food, which is amazing, by the way. And the sense of community was just outstanding, and the welcome, and it was just, I was so privileged and so lucky to get an insight into that. And so I wanted to send my love over to the Crumpsall Synagogue, to everybody, the family and the friends and the Jewish community around the world that has been affected by this. I know that you have allies, and I hope that this persecution stops soon. And just sending you lots and lots of love from us to the community around the world. So, what was he talking about, Viktor? Well, when we connect a task to your values, your deeper values, the contribution, the learning, the growth, the family, purpose, your brain shifts from survival mode of, our fight and flight, to meaning mode. And it's a really good shift to do. So let me give you some examples so you know what I mean. Students, A teenager might not care about algebra, of course they don't. But when they see it as a step towards their dream of becoming an engineer or an architect, then it gathers meaning. I had a young student earlier this week, and she really has a lot of anxiety around maths for good reason, but she does have anxiety around maths. She has a tutor, she works hard. And she said to me, one of the things that she finds really difficult is that there is some students in her class that are disruptive. They're just messing around, And she said, it'd be different if we wasn't in year 9. She said, but we are. She said, and I think I want a good job. And I know I've got to get maths. I've got to get maths GCSE, whether I want to or not, if I want to get a good job, because that's what they're going to ask me about. And it was like, how amazing that she's connected those two when she could actually just mess around with the other kids, but she hasn't. And actually it makes her work harder. It makes her turn up to a tutor. It makes her want to learn, even though she has anxiety around it. So it's another example. Adults. So a professional might be dreading a project, but if they link that to their wages, their stability for their family, or growing their business, then they reconnect to the why. There is lots of things that we find scary in life, lots of things that we think, I'm about to, as I'm recording this afternoon, I'm about to pitch to a school to become one of our resilient kids' schools. And sometimes it is scary, because yes, we wholeheartedly believe in it, but actually, it is scary to think they could say no. They could, that rejection that as human beings we don't want. But you know what? For me, the bigger why is reaching that million kids. So of course I'm going to do it, scary or not. Absolutely. As parents, sometimes even the daily routines, the school run, packed lunches, bedtime battles, do you know what? When we connect to the bigger why, raising confident, resilient kids, it becomes easier, becomes lighter. None of us really crave that routine of the school runs, but actually being able to walk them to school, being able to take your kids to school and spend that time walking side by side, chatting to them, that's where the magic is. So when purpose and values guide your actions, procrastination loses its grip on us. You're not fighting with yourself anymore. You're moving towards something that matters. James Clear, you'll know him probably from the book Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, go and get it, get a copy, it's brilliant. But what he says is anything that we have, if we have a goal, for me, it would be reaching those million kids. If that was my goal, everything I do is either going to take me towards there or away from it. Now, having this meeting, prepping I forgot what it's called, prepping the proposal, working out the costings, all of that, that's taking me towards me sitting, scrolling on my phone because I want to avoid doing it. That's taking me away from. So it's a really simple way of tricking your brain into doing what you need to do. I love in the podcast I've given you tips, but actually we've had a huge amount of feedback on me telling you a story, like a client story, real life story. Obviously, everybody's protected. I never give too much details or real names. So I've kept that in on the podcast, and this is today's. Let me tell you about Lucy's story. Lucy was a university student I worked with a few years ago. She's bright, smart, capable, funny, but became really stuck with a dissertation. And every time she sat down to write it, she'd freeze, she'd scroll on her phone, she'd be at the point of practically cleaning a toilet with her own toothbrush. So when we unpacked the emotions underneath, it turns out she was terrified. She was fearful that it wouldn't be perfect. Now, could she have not done it? Yes. However, anybody who has done a degree will know that if you can pass your degree and you get a grade, and that's fabulous. If you do your dissertation, you get a little like honours in brackets after. And so she was avoiding that feeling of failure, that it wasn't going to be good enough. So what we did is together we sat down, we chunked it down, so into smaller steps, to 1 paragraph a day. Now that doesn't seem a lot, but she had plenty of time. She set the timer, she got a Pomodoro timer, and she set that for 25 minutes. And she got a friend on a different course doing their dissertation to body double on Zoom. Now, they were all really good strategies, but most importantly, she reconnected to her why. She wanted to qualify so she could work in mental health and help other students just like her. Now, if you've read the book or you've heard the podcast before, you might already know that the reason I became a psychotherapist and working with kids and teens is because when I was 16, my dad had a nervous breakdown and there was no support for the family. There was great support for him, but no support for my mum, who was going through this and who had 2 kids. My sister was only 6 at the time. And so we kind of didn't know what was going on. And so I vowed to be the person that my 16-year-old self needed. And I get quite a few, as you can imagine, students who want to go into psychology, who want to go into mental health. And it warms my heart. It makes me choke to think of Lucy, who has gone through her own stuff, has gone through therapy, is come out the other side and is absolutely thriving. Now, for them to want to do that is testament of the work that they've done and of how therapy can help them, and that they want to pass that on. And it's just amazing. So for Lucy, once she remembered her why, her motivation came back. The work hadn't changed, the dissertation was still the same, but her relationship to it had, and she had strategies to get started. So here's the reflection for this week. Think of one task that you've been putting off, or maybe one task one of your kids has been putting off. Your teen maybe not started revising. Kids have got a science project to do. And then write a simple why statement. It might look something like, I've got to finish this report because I want to feel proud of my work. I'm decluttering the house or the garage because I need more of a calm space. I'm revising because I want to open doors for my future. Things like that. Keep it short, keep it meaningful, and make sure it's true, because your brain is not going to sign up to something you've made up. And then pick one tool, whether it's chunking, just 5 minutes, the Pomodoro timer, or body doubling, or a few, and try it this week. And let me know how you get on. I have got something I've got to tackle this week. And so next week, because we're going to carry this series on motivation for the next couple of weeks before we take a break until the new year. So I will report back next week. So let me know, drop me an email at ashley@theresilientkid.co.uk if you've got something that you're going to tackle, or if you see the social media posts that is promoting the podcast, drop us a comment under there. But just know that when you pair strategy with the purpose, procrastination loses its power over you completely. So next time on the podcast, we're going to explore how motivation looks at different life stages, for children, for teens, for adults, and how community and connection can fuel our drive. But for now, remember this: you don't have to wait for motivation to appear. You can create it. One small step, one clear why, one little victory at a time. So thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Lots of love from us to you. Take care, everyone.